All right. Welcome back to the Audiokinetic Theater. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend Damien Kasbauer, product manager at Audiokinetic, who's gonna tell us what's new and what's next in Wise. Damien?
Yeah. Thank you, Guillaume. Thanks. Thanks. It's great to be here today. Appreciate folks queuing up and looking forward to dig deep into what we released last November as part of Wise 2023.1, as well as preview of some of the things that we've got cooking for the next full version. So hang tight. Um, This is our new logo. Definitely check it out on our YouTube channel. It's an incredible deep dive into, behind the scenes of Audiokinetic and Wise. So immersive audio simplified. We are an audio middleware tool manufacturer creating tools to empower you to realize these visions for sound, music, and dialogue in your interactive audio adventures, really. And in 2018, we brought dark and light themes to Wise, along with lightness, contrast, color, saturation, the ability to assign colors to objects throughout the hierarchies. This was our Wizard of Oz moment, right? Because Wise had historically been a gray box without color, and we followed the yellow brick road. And at some point, we asked ourselves, how much darker could the UI be? And taking a page from Spinal Tap, and I'll quote, misquote Nigel Tufnell when he said the answer could be, none more dark. But we dug into that and said to ourselves, no, actually, for the next release, we're going to continue to darken the UI and grow it closer to this idea of contrast, like making it easier on your eyes, bringing you into a environment that feels creative and less fatiguing. So we have a bunch of changes that will be coming as part of 24.1. This is one of them. So stay tuned. Better contrast, easier navigation, less eye strain. And by the way, keep them peeled for this little badge. This is going to indicate features that are coming or planned for 2024.1. Okay, and that's just the first peek at what's next to help kick off today's agenda, covering what's new and what's next for Wise. We're going to be talking about spatial audio, including 3D audio, our acoustics, along with updates to the Wise user interface, our integrations, and other exciting features to support an iterative, real-time, interactive audio workflow. But first, let's talk about spatial audio, 3D audio. In Wise 2023.1, we added new platforms for Apple and Android devices, and this increased the number of platforms that can benefit from 3D audio. And if you're new to this technology, it enables an opportunity for increased spatial precision by delivering audio, including information above and below the listener plane. So these spatial audio formats have started to find their way into your headphones, onto your platforms, and they really do lend themselves to a greater spatial fidelity. And I think the future is really bright for continuing to evolve the fidelity that we experience things using a headphone-based spatialized environment. And all of this works natively as part of Wise's object-based audio pipeline that we introduced in 2021, where sound can be routed across these three categories, offering different levels of spatial precision. Creatively informing the presentation of sounds and categorically in a way that supports the experience while offering a greater opportunity for player immersion. And once that routing is in place with your best intention in Wwise, a system can choose to convert this format to any standard configuration or channels, or as a binaural mix when you're using headphones, or an immersive channel-based mix providing height channels like Dolby Atmos. And ultimately, Wwise transforms to deliver this mix across different output configurations in the best way possible. And earlier this year, we partnered with Dolby to continue focusing on bringing developers a standardized way to produce and deliver spatial interactive audio content for games that is adaptive across devices and platforms. So that just means we're in it, and we are going to continue to evolve with industry leaders. This ensures that object-based formats will continue to grow towards your workflows alongside the adoption in cinema, broadcast, and music. So stay tuned more on that in the future, but we're going to keep going. Meanwhile, I want to talk about another side of spatial audio, and that's acoustics, as we continue to grow towards greater usability, performance, and a representation of reality. And in 2023.1, we added adding to the sound propagation of rooms and portals with the addition of Reverb Zones. This required reworking the way auxiliary sends, align the precision of volume and filtering across chains of reverb for rooms, and just allows us to make these changes with greater detail to get a better representation for these spaces. We also introduced tools to help mitigate the natural occurring phenomenon of phasing using Wwise Reflect, our plugin for early reflections. But also, we know that reality is kind of boring sometimes, and actually, wow, sometimes it's just plain wrong for the experience. So we also offer creative tools to help you shape and bend reality in order to support your experiences with greater levels of detail. But I wanted to illustrate a little bit of the way that Reverb Zones expand on this ability to customize spaces with rooms without portal connections. So if you're familiar with our rooms and portals technology, you define a room using a volume. That room then has connected portals for things like doors or windows that sound can propagate out and through from room to room. And essentially, reverb zones are rooms where you can specify a parent, but you don't have to have portal connections in order to propagate sounds bidirectionally. So let's take a look at this example. We've got a outdoor space. It's a field in an imaginary world. In fact, we're in the Wizard of Oz. We're traipsing through the poppies. We're out in the world, and we can define this outdoor space as our parent spatial audio room. We can give this its own ambient background sounds. We can give it its own reverb, the sound of outdoor reflections. Meanwhile, we've got this group of trees in the center. Well, let's call it the Emerald City. And essentially, we can create for that a reverb zone that represents the forest. This can change the ambient inside of it. There's a little more nature in there. Some birds are chirping potentially. And maybe there's a slight slapback reverb that allows us to, recognize that the space has changed. Well, using a transition region between these two spaces, we can dynamically move between the ambient background sounds and the reverberation without having to cross any lines. It just seamlessly transitions. And sounds that play across both of these areas naturally use the reverb from that space as it's defined, and it propagates through the transition zone. So when I'm hearing a bird in the forest, even though I'm in the field, I can have that spatial representation of it inside the forest so that I can increase that realism. And ultimately, it's towards a better authoring workflow for games that have non-standard spaces. And this is something we heard a lot from customers over the past couple of years who are using our Rooms and Portals technology. If anyone was here last year or digs into the vault for the Batman Arkham Asylum walkthrough where they detailed their use of spatial audio using Wwise. We're getting feedback all the time from developers and continuing to grow towards their needs. And Reverb Zone answers the question that developers had about how to author these unique and non-conforming spaces that needed to sound different, but didn't necessarily fall into the Rooms and Portals methodology. The way Wwise gets this information about the environment, continuing on that environmental acoustic side, we're always improving it. And so in this example, we're looking at the improvement in raycasting that we've done between Wwise 2022 and Wwise 2023.1. We're always trying to become more performant so that we can bring this information back to the simulation, give you the tools to creatively control it, and represent these spaces towards the best presentation of your game. And it's never been a better time to explore these acoustic features of spatial audio while reflecting on the ways it could benefit the immersion of your experience. So be sure to check out recent blogs and live streams where we're covering these new features in depth, going hands-on with getting started with spatial audio acoustics in Unreal and reflect phasing mitigation. Stick around because after this talk, Audiokinetic R&D developer Talik Aklikian is going to go deep into spatial audio acoustics. You'll want to stick around for that. It's going to be fantastic. Let's talk about some of the updates that came in at our point releases. So each year we do a release of Wwise that lands in the fall, and leading up to that, we beta usually towards the end of spring. And then each month, 4 to 6 weeks, we're dropping point releases that improve on that full release. And in 2023.1.1, we added new volumetric spread algorithm for running spatial extent of diversely shaped reverb zones. It really just means that things sound more natural now when you're implementing sounds in that way. And in 2023.1.2, we continued to evolve the work that we started bringing reverb zones into the pipeline, and those zones and transition regions can now overlap with other transition regions, as well as portals, and spatial audio smoothly interpolates or moves between these in a way that makes good sense. Additionally, we're in the deep here. An emitter now sends to multiple reverb zones when it's in more than one reverb zone's transition region. So again, what this slide says is continued commitment to evolving the way that this works, sounds, and is delivered as part of your game and presentation. Some of the things that we have planned for spatial audio coming up in 2024.1 include natural filters for sound propagation. We're really driving towards the best representation of sound as it continues to travel and propagate through a game world. And we think that we have a way forward that brings a more natural sound to the way sound propagates over distance. Additionally, we've got some improvements to our attenuation editor. If you've been following along in the last releases, we started adding curves and more curves and more curves because people are asking us for more and more control. And we're continuing to evolve that workflow by making those curves more usable, more accessible. We'll also be extending what's available in the attenuation editor by adding access to scaling as part of the distance volume curve. So you can now on sounds that are subscribed to an attenuation adjust the scaling on a per sound basis. And this is also true for our diffraction, transmission, and other spatial audio curves, where we've added the ability to warp curves to either emphasize or de-emphasize the effects of spatial audio as part of an attenuation. So all of these things coming to continue expanding and driving towards the best representation of sound as it propagates as part of the attenuation. We have some other things that we want to tackle as well towards greater usability and flexibility for folks. Things like multiple listener support, automation and hold emitter position orientation updates, and like continuous raycasting, just continuing to drive towards performance to make this easily able to be turned on as part of your experience to enhance it in a way that, that feels right. Let's talk about user experience. This release also sees the experience team extending workflows and continually refining the Wwise user interface. So in 2022.1, any folks who have used 22.1, got 1, got 2, got 3, got 4, cool. Well, in that version, we added contextual tab-based workflow that's the start of something that will continue to evolve towards a greater usability in the future. And spoilers, we'll talk more about 24.1 in a second, but we're in the process of working with small groups of experienced and new users to help validate these next steps forward towards a workflow that leverages the experience that you have already across other software products. So talk about that in a second. This is in addition to internal prototype testing, where we're able to go hands-on with experienced developers at Audiokinetic for direct feedback. So underlining here the fact that we really are invested in trying to understand the user experience and bring that right back to the development. But for now, in 2023.1, the number of effects that can be added to each object has been expanded to 255 per object. It's no longer limited to 4. So this is a big deal for some people. These limitations, we're going to continue breaking them down where we can so that we can unlock the potential that you see for your experiences. So you continue to drive towards these incredible representations of the games that you're making. So mess around with this. Find out what happens when you add 50 flangers, a dozen delays, or 100 guitar distortions. But be sure to keep on the plugin, an eye on the plugin CPU and the performance monitor. Our profiling tools will give you an eye on how you're doing and keep you on the sunny side of your resource budget and in good graces with your engineering team. It's very important. That's not all. We've also optimized the effects editor tabs. We've added the meter as a tab to every audio and auxiliary bus, so you can always reach for that to see what's being metered. And we brought tabs to the audio device editor. And this aligns it with that tab-based workflow that we started in 2022.1, which contextually gives you everything you need when you're selecting an object in the Project Explorer, so you don't have to go changing layouts or digging around to different views to get access to the things that are relevant for the object you've selected. And in 2023.1, we also added a new momentary maximum type to our loudness normalization modes. So loudness normalization, gives you the ability to, set loudness standards across your projects that you can rely on and drive towards. And this momentary maximum type, it gives you greater flexibility and control over this measurement for short duration sounds. So now you can choose between the integrated measurement, which is useful for long audio program material, such as music or cinematics, and then this new momentary max type, which is best suited for short individual audio elements, such as sound effects, footsteps, physics impacts. And this, again, just helps to ensure that by enabling loudness normalization in your project across categories, that you can mix with confidence and count on any dynamic mixing systems like HDR audio in Wwise or sidechaining. You can count on these things operating with consistency because loudness normalization will automatically bring them to a place that you can trust across your project. We're also planning, as part of 2024.1, to improve several aspects of the user interface. We already talked about darker mode, right? Bringing an easier on the eyes, more pleasurable to understand environment for the user interface. And we're also working to bring properties out of the center focus and into a property panel paradigm that we're familiar with across other tools like Unity, Unreal, Photoshop, and Visual Studio. Like, this is a paradigm that people are familiar with across other tools, and we're working hard to bring that to Wwise in a way that feels flexible, gives you access to what you need when you need it, and also gets some of the complexity out of the way when it's not part of what you're working on. So we have some mock-ups here that are towards the target that we're trying to hit for 2024. And as we arrive at the beta, we look forward to getting your hands on it, getting that feedback, and driving it right back into what we're working towards for the full release. So please, when the time comes, jump in, let us know what you think, because really these are steps towards a greater vision of a workflow for you in Wwise that brings audio into your center focus so that you can see what you're working on with sound, music, and dialogue in a way that you understand. And there's a ton of other features focused squarely on your workflows, especially in integrations. Last year, we introduced AudioLink, which was a partnership with the Unreal Audio team that allows you to use Unreal Audio alongside of Wwise, connecting the two audio engines and routing sounds from Unreal Audio through Wwise where they can be further processed, spatialized, and understood. And so AudioLink, you don't have to choose anymore. You can do all of the fun things. You can have all of the toys. You want to dig into meta sounds, get generative and crazy. You want to pipe that through Wwise and drop it into spatial audio so that you can leverage all of the geometry at runtime. You don't have to choose anymore. And we're partnered with Unreal Audio to make sure that audio continues to be the most important thing, not what engine you're using. Additionally, we took the Wwise Picker and renamed it. Okay, big change. Wwise Browser now, which is the asset management hub for you to understand what's happening between Wwise and Unreal. And we also then brought the ability to reconcile. So the status of Wwise and Unreal assets, filters for things like sound banks, assets, and types, and it just gives you that ability to understand the connection between Wwise and Unreal in a way that makes sense. And, as I mentioned, reconcile. This is the magic button to help you realign and put things back in sync with each other. It's a manual process that can also be invoked as part of an automated process if that's something your development requires. But right now, it's there for you to bring things back into sync as you drift through the development space. Over in Unity, we added enter play mode options. These are options that allow you to optionally keep the Wwise sound engine running or not as you go in and out of play mode. This is just a speed up in some workflows, and we have a whole live stream devoted to the integrations in 2023.1 where we go deep on the functionality that we brought to Unity in 2023. And as part of one of our patch releases in Wwise 2023.1.1, as well as 2022.1.10, we brought support for Unreal's Niagara. So this is their particle effects system, and now we have a plugin support that works with Wwise, and you can, get crazy with some of that technology. There's a ton of great opportunities in there, and now we're there by default for you to expand on what sound can do in the context of VFX. Okay, time to get swole. GIMs, these are a way for us to bring tiny pieces of our features and present them in a way that are easy to understand, testable, and can become part of your pipeline. So from a high level, what is a GIM? It's a simple scene showcasing a single feature. It's a functional test. You can learn a lot from a GIM, all about the feature, test cases for it, and ensure that your integrations continue to work across releases using GIMs. They're public on GitHub, and if you have a custom integration, I encourage you to reach out and make them part of your development and testing pipeline. And in 2024, we're working in Unreal to bring packaging into a place where developers can easily reach for it as part of an Unreal pipeline. So better support for Unreal asset management, things like Zen server, modular game builds, multi-process cooking. Our integrations team is working alongside new updates to Unreal and working within that, trying to provide what you need to get your games packaged in a way that makes sense. And we're going to continuously improve our GIMs for Unreal so that you can always test against and learn about these features. Meanwhile, over in Unity for 24.1, we'll be expanding our auto-defined sound banks technology, which we launched as part of Wwise 2022.1. This auto-defined sound banks gives you the ability to, granularize the assets that Wwise produces based on events and hand it off to the game engine to manage. The game engine really knows when it loads and unloads different parts of the game, and as part of that, it knows what resources it needs, including audio. And so in this way, we start to move away from the manual sound bank methodology that games have been under for years, where you have to, by hand, decide what goes where and how. While we still allow that ability to optimize that using user-defined sound banks, auto-defined sound banks is an integral piece of that can automate that asset management solution, and we're bringing that to Unity in 24.1 as part of the addressable system. As well, we're carrying that Wwise browser that we talked about, and we'll continue to update GIMs moving forward as we add and expand on those great possibilities. A couple other features. So we introduced a new modernized 3D graphic backend that landed first in the Game Object 3D viewer, and it's going to continue to find its way into other parts of the user interface. This is really the tip of the iceberg. We've been working really hard to put in a framework that will allow us to continue building forward in the future with greater flexibility within the user interface. We're going to go far with this next framework, and I'm really excited to be taking these first steps. Also came with some usability features in the Game Object 3D viewer. So this will continue to find its way into Wwise towards a native Mac and PC version in the future. As well, we've been continually expanding our Wwhat and Wwhackle, or Wwise Authoring API and Wwise Authoring Query Language. These are a bridge to help fill in the gaps in your development workflows in an accessible and customizable way. Wwhat and Wwhackle are tools that you can use to expand on pipelines or create ways for your team to automate processes that you know and get there faster during the development. And lastly, we've added motion plugin support for iOS, tvOS, and macOS to the list of platforms that can leverage haptics for controllers and other devices featuring vibration. Did anyone go to the Spider-Man 2 talk with 5 motion controllers rumbling on this desktop yesterday? It was fantastic, and Tyler Hoffman from Insomniac also spoke at the Audio Summit about the use of haptics in games. This is a continually expanding opportunity for audio professionals to leverage haptics as part of the audio toolkit, and Wwise Motion has been in place as our answer to that in the hands of audio creators using Wwise. Coming up tomorrow, Christian Romer will be going into detail on the use of haptics in Hitman 3. So circle back to the Audiokinetic booth here, as well as at the main conference track, to learn more about haptics and how folks are using it in games. It's great to have folks from the community out here at GDC talking as part of the expo and presenting with their experience on these topics. And lastly, I want to talk about a feature that is out now in 2023.1 that you can enable in its current experimental state: live media transfer. But in 2024, that ability to transfer and update media in real time will arrive as part of the default live connected workflow. We believe it's this ability to quickly iterate and live media transfer. It aims to decrease iteration time when connected to a game. So for instance, inside of Wwise, you have your authoring environment where you're preparing your content, and then you have a game engine that you're building this content for. Meanwhile, you've got assets that get generated from Wwise. They find their way on disk and ultimately are packaged into the game at runtime. And we're envisioning a solution where you arrive to work, connect to the game with the latest build and the newest hotness, and you just keep working. So now that sound that you are during your playthrough thinking, not quite right. I need to jump back into the source for this and make some changes. Well, instead of disconnecting, instead of context switching and getting out of your workflow, let's keep you in it and allow you to make those changes over in your DAW, render them to your originals folder, and push those all the way to the runtime and swap that asset at runtime and immediately play it back to be heard, to be assessed, auditioned, and just continue moving with your day. Like, will we arrive at a workflow where you connect at the beginning of the day, you work all day connected, live, adjusting, making changes, transferring media between your DAW, and at the end of the day, you check in your work units, you generate and leave it to a build machine to generate that media. Like, this is the future we want to imagine for you, where things work seamlessly end to end in your day and you can stay in it, because we know iteration is key to making things sound great in context. And this is just a feedback loop that continues. And all of this is because we know how important iteration is to your workflow. You know, we hear the amazing things you're able to achieve with Wwise. We want to continue to bring you closer to your creative intentions. And we're made up here of developers, partners, platform, manufacturers, students, instructors, academic institutions, and other authors like yourself contributing author articles to our Audiokinetic blog that get translated into 5 languages. You know, this growing community where there's a lot of people exchanging ideas here at the conference and all year long, and Wwise can be a hub for the exchange of that information. So with that, thanks again for being part of this rich tapestry of perspectives, helping to create inspiring, interactive, and audio experience with Wwise. I'm inspired constantly by the work you're doing. It's a pleasure to be up here talking about some of the things we're working towards. And ultimately, we want to hear more from you. So continue to let us know how we're doing and how we can meet your workflow with Wwise.